and he called to Moses. And the Eternal One spoke to him from the tent of meeting. And he called to Moses. These are the words that begin not only this week's Torah portion, but as it begins this week's Torah portion, it also opens the third book of the Torah, the third of the 5 books of Moses, the book of Leviticus. Vayikra Adonai et Moshe. Vayikra gets translated in Hebrew as "and he called," and is the first word, really, of the book of Leviticus. And in our tradition, oftentimes the very first word of the Torah portion gives the name to the Torah portion. Unless it begins with, "and God spoke to Moses saying," which is all the time from the book of Exodus. And in this case, it will be the first word after that. The first unique word of the Torah portion. Vayikra is therefore the name of this week's Torah portion. And in Hebrew, it's also the name of the book. So we don't call it the book of Leviticus. We call it the book of "and he called," which in and of itself has some interesting teachings, which I think we want to talk about. I will talk about it in a moment. But first, let me recap for you where we are. We used to be in Egypt, and we no longer are in Egypt. We left Egypt. There were all kinds of plagues and things, and eventually we got out. And then we went on this short journey through the wilderness, and we ended up at the foot of this mount called Mount Sinai. And we haven't moved since then. The book of Leviticus opens, and we're still at the foot of Mount Sinai. But a lot has happened. I mean, just within the first few days of our being there, we witnessed revelation. That was a pretty amazing moment. And after that, Moses went up the mountain and came back down and went back up again. In the meantime, after we heard the 10 utterances, the 10 pronouncements, we also got the tablets of the law. And one thing led to another, things happened in the meantime, but eventually we were given this commandment to build a tabernacle. And the final chapters of the book of Exodus are about how do we build a tabernacle. And it's a communal experience. We're talking about sacred space. And the theme of tonight is sacred space. The tabernacle is sacred space par excellence, as we say in French. Which means something like per excellence in English. But don't bang on my translation. And it is sacred space because all of us participated in building it. The Torah says that we were the ones that we were called, men, women, children, elderly, everybody was called to come and bring gifts in order to build the tabernacle. All of us chipped in. We created something that was a reflection of who we were. We really owned that space. Like it was us and we were it. And there it stood in its sacredness in the middle of all the tribes assembled. It united us. We found our nation surrounding the tabernacle. And in the middle of that tabernacle, the divine presence was dwelling. Now, the only thing that was missing is the people to help work in the tabernacle itself. Those who were going to be the ones to lead worship. So the selected few were taken from the tribe of the Levites, and obviously the Cohens were part of that, and they became the priests, the temple workers, and Aaron was voted, well, it wasn't voted, he was selected to be the high priest. And so the book of Leviticus, as the English/Latin alludes to, is the book that is connected to anything that's to do with Levi, with Levi rules, laws, and most of that book is long chapters about all the rules and all the laws and how the priest needs to be dressed, what kind of garment is appropriate to wear as you lead those rituals, and also obviously the challenging setup of the sacrificial cult. And this week's Torah portion is all about sacrifices. And there is a long line of animals being cut and torn into pieces and a lot of blood being dashed about. And in other words, like our friend Rami Shapiro told us when he was here a few years ago, and that Torah portion was the week that he came, there's a lot of bull in this Torah portion. And it's true. It's true. On the surface level, he was right. There is a lot of that. And I think that if and when we open the book of And He Called, there is also some deeper teaching that I suspect are waiting for us to discover in those pages, in those verses. For example, to begin to see all those rituals perhaps as spiritual practices to help us hear more, to help support our opening to better listening to whatever it is that is called. And He called. So following Maimonides' teaching, the Rambam, but also it shows up in a lot of the teachers of Kabbalah. I understand that God, or again, whatever you hold as that, is the being or beingness itself that really never stops speaking, that really never stops calling. God has been speaking and calling since the creation was creation. In fact, our sages tell us that through divine speech, all of this came to be. Our sages are telling us that the whole of creation comes from the voice of the divine, from the vibration that we call speech, right? But really what it sought to express is that all of this is God vibrating. This all universe buzzing. This all universe energy. Divine energy is flowing. And the issue our sages are telling us is not that God speaks, is that the issue is that we are not able to hear. We are not able to make ourselves available to receive that which is always being called, that which is always being spoken, always being shared. We're not able to receive. And the word receive in Hebrew is Kabbalah. So you understand that the principle of Kabbalah was to help us receive, to help us hear, to help us embrace. The image I have is that, which actually is very from Maimonides. Obviously, he doesn't say it in his Guide of the Perplex exactly this way, but the image that I get from what he's saying is that there is this dial in our inner transistor. And this dial in our everyday life is stuck on that radio, on that station called Me Radio. Have you ever listened to Me Radio lately? It's Me Radio, news and information. Have you listened to that station lately? It's amazing. It's got all the latest news of what's happening to me. And it's on all day long. I mean, it's this amazing narrative about all the amazing news about me. And it's ongoing. It's really blaring in there. And and when it's not talking about what's happening to me now, there's this tape that they must be putting on, of all the information and the news that were happening in the past. And it's on this loop. It keeps coming back and back. It's fascinating. I'm completely fascinated by it. I'm actually mesmerized by that radio station. So much so, and it's so loud in there, that I'm unable to really even know that they could be just further down the dial another much more worthy radio station. But the jingle is really powerful of that meat radio, news and information. It goes like this. You probably heard it because it's catchy. I mean, really, it's me, I, mine. It's really it's a good sound about it. And that's the impossibility we have to actually, move the dial a little further, to be able to get to God's frequency. Right? Right there. Because our dial is really stuck. Cranking something, I don't know. So in the days before transistor radios, I'm talking 2,000 years ago, they had no clue about what that could be. They had a different kind of image. Like the transistor radio, they had it as the tabernacle. Right? And the station for God's broadcast, same idea. That was different image. And they also had devised this practice to help us move the dial to the proper station. And they call them sacrifices. Now, that might sound a little bizarre, but we have to understand what the word sacrifice actually is in Hebrew. Because the translation as sacrifice is actually not that accurate. It's not bad, but it's not exactly accurate. The word in Hebrew is korban. And the word korban in Hebrew, the root of it is karov, which means to draw near, like to get close. So the truth of the matter is that all of those practices, those rituals, were in the purpose that was underlying them was for the people who made those sacrifices to actually draw near, draw closer to God. That was the whole purpose behind that. So if you were to translate that in our modern times image, right, back with the radio station, these were the practices, the spiritual practices that would help us to draw nearer and nearer, closer and closer to the frequency we need to hit that is unique to us. And that's very important. That is unique to us, where we can finally tune in God's broadcast. That we can finally tune in to hear the divine voice flowing. And it's important, like we talked about during the Amidah, that it's unique to each of us. Like no one has the same radio frequency on which they listen for the divine. We have our own inner radio, and what is true for us is uniquely true for us. So we can't look at somebody else's dial and say, well, what's your station? 1640 AM? Let me see if I can do that. Right? Because it won't work. You have to find your own number on the dial. Yet, I don't want to discard the word sacrifice either, because there is value to translating korban as sacrifice as well, because there is truth in the fact that there is a part of us that needs to be released, that needs to be let go. That part of us that is stuck on me radio, that is the part that has to be released, that has to be let go. I don't know if we would call it sacrificed, but it has to be offered up. It has to be surrendered. You know, that focus on me, and my. That illusion that there is anything that is actually mine. You know, and that's what the sacrifice was. It was about surrendering any belief that I own that animal or that whatever it was. I often say, I do this exercise with the Bnei Mitzvah kids. I say, if sacrifices were true today, and obviously they're not, the rabbi would ask you to bring your most cherished possession to be offered up. Your iPad, your iPhone, your video game console. You should see the face of the kids when I tell them. I'm like, right? But this is the practice. This is about realizing what it is we really own versus what it is that we really are borrowing. We're here for a really short time. And there's really nothing that is mine. Right? And there's this letting go of that grasping, of that wanting. So I think the word sacrifice also has value. Now, the question that we are left with is, where is that tabernacle in your life? Where is that sacred space in your life? What is it that you do to draw near? You see, twice a month we gather in this space. And in this space together, we create a tent of meeting and offer each other the opportunity to experience that deeper listening within, right? I mean, we walk through the different stages of our worship service tonight together to really get that it's built to open the heart and stand in the presence of the one that we are. But that's only a couple times a month. What are you doing in between? Where are the places in your life where you are able to recreate some kind of sacred space? Maybe it's a little corner in your house when you are able to carve out a meditation from time to time. Maybe it's a little space where you are able to find yourself praying or chanting, painting, drawing, playing music, doing some yoga. Maybe you find that sacred space in nature, and you go out there and you pitch your tent of meeting in the middle of the trees, and that's your sacred space. Our rabbis 2,000 years ago were faced with the disaster of the destruction of the temple. We lost our physical sacred space. So they created a different kind of sacred space. They built a temple in time. And they called it Shabbat. Are you carving out sacred time in your life?